A web service, or an API, is an online program that's designed to interact with other programs. Here we're going to look at the use of two APIs that allow us to get bibliographic information. There are actually a lot of these because these are the ways that library computers talk to one another. The first is a service called Classify from OCLC, and what it does is if we send an ISBN for a book in the URL of our connection, it will reply with XML information about that book, that author, and so on. So we can import the elements. If we want to see raw XML, we have to convert it to a string and then pass it off to view data. So that's what I do here. Now as we look at this, we can see this is a standard XML file. It's got information about the work. In this tag, we notice that there are a number of attributes that have information about author, editions, holdings, format, title. But we don't want to pull that information out of the tag attributes if we could pull it out of fields. So for example, if we need the author, we can pull it from the author field here. Notice that's tagged author. Notice also that the author tag has two attributes, and these are unique identifiers that help us locate this particular author in online databases. So we can go from this one book to other books by the same author, and things like that. We can also get other information from this. I'll just scroll down a little bit. There's information not only about the author and the work, but there's information about where we would find it in particular libraries. So for example, most North American public libraries use a classification system called Dewey Decimal, and the Dewey Decimal call number is in this record. So if we have the ISBN, we can find out how to locate the book in a local public library. There's also Library of Congress call numbers, which is the library classification system used by many academic libraries in North America. And so that will also help us to locate a copy of the book if we have access to a university library or a research library of some kind. Now we can import this as symbolic XML, which converts XML tags into Mathematica commands. And this, as we've seen, makes it quite easy to use cases to parse the information out of a record. So here we use cases and parse out author and title. I'm actually pulling it from the attributes of the work tag in that case. We can also parse out the Library of Congress call number, and we can do many other things once we have a record like this. Now we interact with OCLC Classify simply by using a URL that's formatted in the correct way. So we don't have to do too much to interact with that particular web service. There are some web services where we have to open up what's called a service connection. The Open Library is one of these. So we start by opening a service connection to the Open Library, and it returns this service object. This tells us we have a connection now that we can use to ask for information. To demonstrate this API, I'm going to look for 20 items, or up to 20 items, authored by Walter Lippmann. So here's Walter Lippmann. He's got a person, entity, photograph, birth, and death dates. Now in this case, I've used the Open Library command, and this refers to this open connection that we just created. So if I go back up here, I assigned it to the symbol Open Library. So I can now use that symbol to do things like search for books. Whoops, start scrolling too soon. Okay, so here we have the information as a data set. The first item, title, is Public Opinion, author name Walter Lippmann, published 1922. 37 different editions of this work have been found. Now notice that each edition has its own edition key. So from the Open Library we can request not only particular books but particular editions of books. And this is important because there could be important differences between editions, of course, but it's also could be the case that we may have access to one or more editions in libraries near us, but not others. Since this is a data set, we can retrieve a record for one book, Preface to Politics. It gives us information about title, publication year, a number of different editions, subjects, has full text is interesting. In the Open Library, we can often find books where we can retrieve the actual book if we're interested in it. Let's get some more information about this one. First publication year, publication date. Here's the publication dates of the different editions. Notice it's been republished a number of times. Count the number of times the various editions of his various books have been published. And here they're sorted by descending number of editions. As you can see, Public Opinion is the book that was reprinted the most times. We can also get this list of Open Library IDs. So here's are the Open Library IDs for A Preface to Politics, one of his books. And we can request information about a particular edition. So here's a particular edition of this work. In this case, published by M. Kennerly in 1913. It's got Library of Congress call number, the OCLC unique identifier, country where it was published, places where it was published. We can also request a book summary. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, this just tells us, this gives us links to things like the cover and a preview and so on. We can also retrieve, let's see how this looks. We can retrieve the text itself. And then I might as well evaluate these next two things. Having retrieved the book, we can do a word cloud of the book and see what it's about. And I've also grabbed the cover image of the book. Okay, so this word cloud is for the whole book. In what we just did there, we found a book, we found an edition, we retrieved the full text of that edition, and once we have that, all of the tools that we already know how to use are available to us.